The sound of 200 motorcycle engines shaking Maple Street at dawn made Estelle Washington think the world was ending. She stumbled from her bed, her 73-year-old knees protesting, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, and when she pulled back the faded curtain she saw them, an army of leather and chrome stretching from one end of her quiet street to the other, every single rider facing her small house with its peeling paint and sagging porch. Her hands trembled so badly she had to grip the windowsill to stay upright. This was it. This was the moment her neighbors had warned her about. This was what happened when you got involved with people like that. Yesterday's kindness had become today's nightmare, and Estelle's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good. She thought about calling the police, about running out the back door, about hiding in her bedroom closet like she'd done as a child when storms rolled through, but her legs wouldn't move. She could only stand there frozen, watching as a massive man climbed off his bike and started walking toward her house, his leather jacket marked with a snarling wolf's head, his face partially hidden behind a thick gray beard, and she recognized him. Wade Butler. The man she'd helped last night. The man she'd given her last $8 to save. Oh God, what had she done? Wade stopped at the bottom of her porch steps and the engines cut off in perfect unison, the silence that followed somehow more terrifying than the roar had been. Estelle's fingers found the doorknob. Every instinct screamed at her to lock it, to barricade herself inside, but something deeper, something that sounded like her grandmother's voice, told her to be brave. She opened the door and stepped onto her porch in her nightgown and worn slippers, the cool September morning raising goosebumps on her dark skin. "Miss Estelle," Wade called out, his voice carrying across the silent street where neighbors were now emerging from their houses, faces pressed to windows, cell phones raised to record whatever was about to happen. Estelle lifted her chin, determined not to show fear even as her heart threatened to beat right out of her chest. "Mr. Butler." Wade removed his sunglasses and she saw his blue eyes were wet. "Yesterday evening at the gas station you gave me your last $8. You helped me when I was bleeding and hurt, when that kid behind the counter wouldn't even call for help, when I was nothing to you but a stranger with a bad reputation." Estelle's throat tightened. She remembered it all, the rain hammering down, the blood seeping through his fingers, the choice she'd made to help instead of walk away. "You were hurt," she said simply. "What else was I supposed to do?" Wade's voice cracked. "Everyone else drove past. Everyone else looked away. But you, with nothing in your pocket but $8 that should have bought your food for the week, you stopped. You helped. You saw me as a human being worth saving." He turned to the assembled bikers, hundreds of them standing beside their motorcycles in the early morning light, and raised his hand. "Because of that, we're here. The Iron Wolves take care of family, and Miss Estelle, you became family the moment you chose kindness over fear." The street exploded into motion. Pickup trucks Estelle hadn't noticed pulled forward, beds loaded with lumber and supplies. Bikers began unloading tools, carrying boards, setting up sawhorses right there in her front yard. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes climbed the porch steps carrying a toolbox. "I'm Carmen," she said gently. "Wade's sister. We're going to fix your house today. Everything that's broken, everything that's wearing out. New roof, new porch, new windows. By sunset, this place will be solid for another 50 years. Estelle's knees finally gave out and she sat down hard on her top step, her hand pressed to her chest. "I can't," she whispered. "It's too much." Wade climbed the steps carefully, wincing as his injured ribs protested, and knelt beside her. "Miss Estelle, you gave everything you had to help me. Let us give back. Please." Tears spilled down Estelle's weathered cheeks as the reality crashed over her. This wasn't vengeance. This wasn't threat. This was something she'd stopped believing existed in the world. Pure reciprocal kindness, goodness answering goodness, a debt being paid that she'd never expected to collect. "I don't understand," she said through her tears. Wade took her hand gently. 10 years ago I crashed my bike in Arkansas. Broke my arm, hurt my leg bad. I was lying on the roadside bleeding and people drove past like I was garbage. Then an old black woman stopped. She looked like she could have been your sister. She helped me into her car, drove me to the hospital, stayed until my brothers arrived. When I tried to pay her, she refused. She said, "Baby, we're all we got in this world. We help each other or we die alone." I never forgot her. Yesterday when you helped me, I saw her again. I saw that same light, that same refusal to let fear win. This isn't charity. This is me paying forward what I can never pay back. Around them the street had transformed into controlled chaos. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air. Someone fired up a generator. 2 men climbed onto Estelle's roof and began stripping away the old worn shingles. In her yard a woman was setting up a grill, the smell of cooking meat already beginning to drift on the morning breeze. Estelle's neighbor Mabel Jenkins approached hesitantly, carrying a pitcher of sweet tea, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Estelle, honey, what's happening?" Mabel asked. Estelle wiped her eyes and stood on shaking legs. "I helped someone yesterday. Used my last $8 to buy supplies when he was hurt. Now he's helping me back." Mabel looked around at the bikers working with focused efficiency, at the lumber being measured and cut, at the organized teams coordinating like a construction crew. "These are the Iron Wolves," she said, her voice hushed. "Everyone says they're dangerous." Carmen overheard and turned, her expression patient but firm. "Everyone says a lot of things. Most of it's wrong. We're a brotherhood and sisterhood of people who've made mistakes and are trying to build something better. Your neighbor saw past our reputation yesterday. Maybe you could try the same today." Mabel's face flushed but she nodded slowly. "Can I help?" By noon Estelle's porch had been completely rebuilt, the rotting boards replaced with solid lumber, new railings installed, steps that didn't creak or sag. The roof was halfway done, new dark shingles being laid in perfect rows. Inside, women from the club were cleaning and organizing, and when Estelle finally worked up the courage to go inside, she found her kitchen stocked with groceries, real food, fresh vegetables and meat and bread and milk, more than she'd seen in her refrigerator in 2 years. She stood in her kitchen with her hands over her mouth, overwhelmed by the enormity of it, and Carmen appeared at her elbow. "There's more," Carmen said gently. She led Estelle to the living room where Wade sat on her old couch, an envelope in his hands. He stood when she entered, moving carefully. "Miss Estelle, we heard you have a grandson." "Caleb?" Estelle nodded, unable to speak. "We heard he wants to be a mechanic but can't afford school." Wade handed her the envelope. Inside were legal documents, scholarship papers, letters from technical colleges. Estelle's vision blurred as she tried to read them, but Wade explained. "Full ride to Nashville Technical College. 4 years, all expenses paid. We've got connections at the best mechanics shops in the state. He'll have a job waiting when he graduates." Estelle's legs gave out again, and this time Wade caught her, lowering her gently to the couch. She sobbed into her hands, great heaving cries that came from somewhere deep in her soul, all the years of struggle and sacrifice and worry pouring out in those tears. Carmen sat beside her and rubbed her back while Wade knelt in front of her, this giant intimidating man with the gentle heart, and waited patiently for her to breathe again. "Why?" Estelle finally managed. "Why would you do all this?" Wade's eyes were red. "Because you did. Because when you had nothing you gave everything. Because you reminded me that goodness still exists in this world and it's worth fighting for. Because I want to live in a world where kindness like yours is rewarded instead of punished." He pulled out another document, this one showing a bank account. "We also set up a fund. Small monthly stipend. Not a fortune, but enough that you'll never have to choose between food and medicine again. Enough that you can breathe." Estelle stared at the numbers on the page, more money than she'd seen in a decade, and something broke open in her chest, some tight knot of anxiety and fear that had been there so long she'd forgotten what peace felt like. She pulled Wade into a hug, this stranger who'd become family, and felt him hug her back carefully, mindful of his cracked ribs, and when they separated both their faces were wet with tears. Outside the work continued. The afternoon sun climbed high and hot, but the bikers didn't slow. The roof was finished by 2 o'clock. Windows were replaced, old drafty single panes swapped for new energy-efficient doubles. Inside, plumbers fixed leaks that had been dripping for years. Electricians updated outlets and replaced ancient wiring. The bathroom got a new toilet and sink. The bedroom got fresh paint. Young Marcus from down the street, a kid everyone said was heading toward trouble, stood watching the work with fascination. One of the younger bikers noticed and called him over. "You want to learn something?" The kid nodded eagerly, and for the next 2 hours he helped sand and paint, listened to stories about engines and metalwork, absorbed knowledge and attention from men who understood what it meant to be young and angry and looking for purpose. Old Mr. Patterson, who'd lived on Maple Street for 40 years, brought out lawn chairs and sat watching with tears running down his weathered face. When Wade passed by, Mr. Patterson called out, "I judged you wrong, son. Judged you by your jacket instead of your heart. I'm sorry." Wade stopped and shook the old man's hand. "We all make mistakes. What matters is whether we learn from them." By evening the transformation was complete. Estelle stood in her yard with what felt like the entire neighborhood gathered around, looking at a house she barely recognized. The peeling paint was gone, replaced by fresh cream with forest green trim. The roof gleamed with new shingles. The windows sparkled. The porch stood solid and strong. Flowers had been planted in beds along the walkway. The yard was trimmed and cleaned. It looked like a different house. It felt like a different life. Wade climbed onto the porch steps, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd of bikers and neighbors who'd spent the day mixing together, learning to see past their preconceptions. Today we helped one person, Wade said. But the real work starts tomorrow. Miss Estelle showed us that kindness doesn't require anything except the willingness to see someone else's pain and respond. Starting next month, the Iron Wolves are launching a community program right here in Grayson County. We're going to identify elderly residents who need help and we're going to help them. Home repairs, yard work, rides to doctor appointments, whatever they need. Because if this brotherhood doesn't stand for something bigger than ourselves, then what's the point? The bikers erupted in cheers, engines revving in agreement, and the neighbors clapped, some of them crying, all of them transformed by witnessing what happens when fear gives way to understanding. As the sun began to set, painting the Tennessee sky in shades of orange and pink, the bikers prepared to leave. Each one stopped to hug Estelle or shake her hand, thanking her for reminding them why they did this, why the patch on their jacket meant something more than reputation. Wade was the last to go. He stood at the bottom of her new porch steps with his helmet in his hands. "I don't know how to thank you," Estelle said, her voice hoarse from crying. "You already did. Yesterday, with $8 and the courage to help when walking away would have been easier." He handed her a card with a phone number. "You need anything ever, you call. Day or night. Your family now." Estelle took the card and pulled Wade into one more hug. "You tell that woman in Arkansas," she whispered. "You tell her the kindness she showed you just kept spreading. Tell her it mattered." "I will," Wade promised. The motorcycles rumbled to life and rolled away one by one, the sound fading into the distance until the street was quiet again. Estelle stood on her new porch watching the stars come out, surrounded by neighbors who'd learned something important today about judging books by their covers and seeing the humanity underneath the leather. That's when Caleb's broken-down truck turned the corner and her grandson stopped dead in the middle of the street, staring at the transformed house. "Grandma's," he breathed, climbing out. "What happened?" She told him everything. She told him about the gas station in the rain, about Wade bleeding on the pavement, about using her last $8 because helping was the only choice her heart would let her make. She told him about this morning, the terror of seeing 200 motorcycles on their street, the overwhelming kindness that followed. And then she handed him the scholarship papers and watched his face cycle through disbelief and hope and joy so pure it made her cry all over again. "You did this," Caleb said, his voice breaking. "You gave everything and look what came back." "That's not why I did it," Estelle said firmly. "I know. That's why it means something." They sat together on the new porch, grandmother and grandson, and talked about dreams that suddenly felt possible, about futures that had opened up like flowers, about the power of choosing kindness even when fear makes it difficult. Somewhere in the night a motorcycle engine rumbled past, a single headlight in the darkness, and Estelle knew it was one of the Iron Wolves keeping watch, making sure their family stayed safe. She thought about her grandmother's words from decades ago, about how we're all we have in this world, about how we help each other or we die alone. She thought about that woman in Arkansas who'd stopped for Wade 10 years ago, setting in motion a chain of kindness that had traveled across time and distance to land here on Maple Street, transforming an old woman's life with $8 and an open heart. She understood now that kindness creates ripples that spread farther than we can imagine, that no act of compassion is ever wasted, that the universe keeps accounts we can't see and rewards those brave enough to love when fear tells them to run. 6 months later, Estelle stood in the newly opened Iron Wolves Community Center on the south side of town, watching elderly residents line up to sign up for help. Wade had been true to his word. The club had organized teams to assist seniors with home repairs, transportation, companionship, whatever they needed. The local newspaper ran a feature story and suddenly the Iron Wolves weren't just the fearsome motorcycle club anymore. They were neighbors. They were helpers. They were proof that redemption was real and community could be found in the most unexpected places. Estelle volunteered at the center 3 days a week, her purpose renewed, her life transformed. Caleb was thriving in his first semester at technical college, calling her every Sunday with stories about engines and friends and a future so bright it hurt to look at directly. The house on Maple Street stood solid and warm through the winter storms, no leaks, no drafts, no worry. And every month on the anniversary of that rainy night, Wade rode by to check on her, to share coffee on the porch, to remind each other that goodness still exists if we're brave enough to practice it. On the 1-year anniversary, the Iron Wolves organized a celebration at the community center. Hundreds attended, seniors who'd been helped and bikers who'd done the helping and neighbors who'd learned to see past stereotypes. There was food and music and laughter, and Wade presented Estelle with a plaque that read, "Estelle Washington Community Hero, one act of kindness changed everything." She stood before the crowd with tears streaming down her face and told them the truth. "I didn't do anything special. I saw someone who needed help and I helped. That's all. But I learned that when we choose compassion over fear, when we see people instead of stereotypes, when we give even when we have nothing left, we create something beautiful. We create community. We create hope. We create the world we want to live in." The applause was thunderous, and Estelle looked out at all those faces, black and white, young and old, bikers and retirees and everyone in between, all brought together by $8 and the refusal to let fear win. That night, lying in her comfortable bed in her solid house, Estelle thought about her grandmother and imagined her smiling, saying, "That's my baby girl, that's how it's done." She thought about Wade and Carmen and all the iron wolves who'd shown her that family isn't always blood, that the most fearsome-looking people can have the gentlest hearts. She thought about Caleb building his future, about all the seniors being helped, about ripples spreading outward from one small choice made in the rain. And she understood that this was the secret we keep forgetting. We are all we have. In this hard world we have each other. And when we remember that, when we act on it, when we choose to help even when it costs everything, we create something stronger than fear, more powerful than hate, more lasting than violence. We create love. We create home. If this story moved you, if you believe in unexpected kindness and second chances, if you've ever been helped by a stranger or been the stranger who helped, share this story. Let it remind people that goodness exists in unlikely places, that bikers can be heroes, that elderly women with nothing can change everything, that $8 and courage can transform a community. Hit that like button if you believe in redemption and the power of seeing past appearances to the humanity underneath. Subscribe for more true stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, proof that we're building a better world together, one act of compassion at a time. Leave a comment about a time kindness changed your life or you helped someone and saw the difference it made. These stories matter because they show us who we really are beneath the fear and division. Estelle Washington gave her last $8 to a bleeding stranger on a rainy night, and that gift multiplied beyond measure, not because she expected it but because kindness recognizes kindness and the universe rewards those brave enough to love when everything tells them to run. Be brave. Be kind. Be the person who stops to help. Be Estelle standing in the rain with $8 and an open heart, choosing humanity over fear. That's how we change the world. One person, one moment, one choice. And the ripples spread forever.